All right, Mark, welcome. So thank you very much for joining us. Today we have Mark VonAppen from Fully Involved Leadership. Mark, thank you. It's been a couple of months that we've been working on this, and I want to just start off by saying I really appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for everybody who's going to be watching this, this is geared towards Washington Township Fire Departments in a leadership series. Mark VonAppen has, for many, many years, contributed to fire engineering through their leadership series. He was a captain with Palo Alto Fire Department and since 1998. Congratulations on your recent retirement, 2022 in September there. And
2023.
2023, yes, got my years wrong.
It's 24. I lose track of time too. I forget.
Yep. And then he was also instrumental in California's training for the initial written firefighter survival training series that they did. So, Mark, does that pretty much sum it up, or anything else we should jump in on that?
No, thank you for having me. It's nice to finally get this together. I know we tried to do it in September or something.
Yeah. So
when we were at Firehouse and we just couldn't connect, and so now we're here.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and I know that even in retirement, things snowball quickly, as I hear. So
yeah, it's funny because it seems like I was less busy when I was working two jobs and doing all kinds of stuff. And now that I'm retired, it's like I don't know how my wife did it for basically 25 years without me in the house. So but we're doing the whole. Now she's got a roommate who lives with her now, who hasn't been here for basically 25 years. So we're figuring that out too, but it's going good. So
jumping right in and making it your own, huh?
Yeah. So she told me when I retired, she said, I've been used to you being gone for, basically, you've been a firefighter the entire time I've known you. So, so it's kind of weird that I'm home all the time now. So, just make sure that she has her space, gets to, do whatever she wants to do with her girlfriends and stuff. So it's good.
There you go. That's probably a good lesson, is remembering that for all of us during our careers, that they sacrifice as much, if not more, than we do on a regular basis.
I think absolutely more. I think that, not to segue into something else, but I think that, we kind of puff ourselves up as making a career the most important thing in the world. And we really do forget or aren't even aware of what goes on at home sometimes and a lot of the fires that they put out here. So I'm very thankful for her and who she's been to me for my career and our entire marriage.
Very cool. So I guess we'll just jump into it. I wanted to kind of pick your brain and introduce our members to some of the training philosophies and your history on the leadership side of things. I've really enjoyed, when I started reading your blogs and going back through old videos and stuff like that, I've really enjoyed what I've seen. So can you give me just a quick overview of kind of how you approach things? I know it's a broad question, but what is it that you really lean on, as far as, because I see a lot about communication and being present and open-minded. Can you expand on a little bit on your philosophy?
I think, well, in order to answer that question, like, what do I, what's my philosophy and stuff? I guess it's all about building trust and creating relationships, because that's what work is all about. And I remember when I did my first FDIC a number of years ago, I was super nervous, and I started off by saying, if you're not putting your people first, you're doing it wrong. And the whole thing of Fully Involved is creating, a trust and a thriving relationship through mutually agreed upon expectations. And the person who's in a leadership role is just as accountable to those expectations. There's a set of expectations for the person in a leadership role and for the person in the subordinate role, and they both hold one another accountable. And it's a mutually driven accountability system, and that's how we create that trust and create those relationships. Because people are going to go a whole lot farther for you if they know that you care about them and they trust you. Without that, there's nothing.
Yeah. You had a board that you created and everybody signed their name to. What was that, and how did that come to be?
That started going way back to my childhood and some of the influences that I had there. But where that came from, that's the Excellence is My Responsibility board, if that's what you're referring to.
I believe so.
And that's that's the basis of our accountability system, where we sign our name and our badge number to as a way of being accountable to one another, saying that we're going to win our individual battle every single day when we come to work, and be the best version of ourselves when we show up. If I can use a cliche, but just show up and control how we show up. And then when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we take a look at that board and say, well, that's our social contract, and I sign my name and my badge number to it, and that's binding. And we hold each other accountable to it. And when we're not living up to who we said we'd always be, you know, it's there to remind us of who we were in our interview, who we said we'd always be when we interviewed with the chief.
How do you, or how did you manage to keep people accountable, but also not drive them into the ground and not just make it another cliche?
I think, well, I think what it is I think that what we had there is we had the right people on the bus. And I think when you get the right chemistry together, that's where that whole thing kind of came from. Was it wasn't it wasn't me, laying down some dogma from on high. It's actually me observing what the guys were doing every single day, and me trying to keep up with them, and a way of saying, hey, let's do this together. I'm going to need you just as much as you're going to need me. Yes, I'm the person who's ultimately accountable for everything that goes on in the station, and we're going to do it together. So it was never anything. It was one of those things where we had the gentle reminders occasionally, myself included, where the guys would have to remind me sometimes of when I would get off track. But it's one of those things where you never really had to come down on anybody, because people were more concerned about letting their brothers and sisters down. And that's probably one of the biggest disappointments, is when your brothers and sisters express disappointment in you, right? And so that was kind of the motivating factor. But the thing is, I think a lot of times, motivation for people in the fire service, it wanes sometimes, but we're really lucky because we get very motivated people that come through the door. So generally speaking, we've got the right people on the bus, and it's just keeping them, in the right, getting them in the right seats, and making sure that we're all facing in the right direction, and marching in lockstep, so that we're being who we said we'd always be.
That's cool. You made an interesting kind of quick comment there about we have a lot of motivated people in the fire service, but sometimes that wanes. How did you maintain that edge over the years? How did you maintain that drive and the focus and the discipline? And what can other people do to kind of emulate that?
Well, I didn't always do it, and that's the thing. That's the fallacy, is that people think that everybody's motivated 100% of the time, and it's not that way. But what I really say all the time is I derived a lot of my motivation from watching my brothers and sisters working, and seeing how hard they work and the level of expertise that they have, and that inspired me to want to be better, to try to keep up with them. And I was in, as a company officer, I was in a fairly unique position where I was, on medical calls or fires and stuff like that. I was directing, and I could observe a lot of what was going on, and I was constantly amazed by how much people care and how hard they work. So, in terms of, those daily reminders, it was just watching, taking in the greatness around you, and appreciating that. And then, when those people, when their motivation wanes a little bit too, you just try to elevate them, pick them up. Just
Very cool.
you also have to know what motivates your people, in terms of, certain people need a kick in the ass, certain people need a pat on the back, certain people need, other things. So you have to understand who your people are intrinsically in order to help motivate them. Our job as company officers, or I felt my job as a company officer, Lou Holtz articulated it this way, where he said, your job as a leader isn't to motivate people, but it's just to make sure that they don't become unmotivated. So we have to give them the support in the areas that they need it, so that they can, maintain that drive. Because what really ultimately, drives down motivation is the organizational friction that occurs when we're trying to lead things forward, and do positive things. And, a lot of times we're met with a lot of resistance, because they always say, right, there's the cliche out there, what are the two things that firefighters hate the most? Change and the way things are. So, I guess that was a long answer, but it was us doing it together. It's no one person driving everything. Ultimately, yes, I'm the one who is responsible for making sure that things function correctly and we do things the right way. But we all did it together. And when you get the
That's
right people together, it just there's no stopping it.
what happens when you know, eventually you will have that one bad apple that rotates in or doesn't doesn't mesh. They may be great, but they may have a different style or philosophy than your own. How does that kind of play out in the end, and what challenges and opportunities does that present to you?
Well, you have to the we said it earlier, it's the whole thing's based on mutually agreed upon expectations and communication and trust. And one of the things that we have to be able to do is sit down and talk to people and get people going in the right direction. They may not be the most enthusiastic, they may not, support, everything that we're doing. But what we won't tolerate is, we have to make sure that people aren't trash talking the organization, make sure that if there were times where I'm not a big morning meeting guy. That a lot of departments have a big morning meeting and they sit down and talk about what's going to go on throughout the day and talk about what's going on in the department for sometimes hours on end. I was a standing morning meeting guy because I think what it does is it limits the amount of bitching that can occur. And when the bitching
Mm,
starts, if it gets to, I'll let people get it out. And then, once it goes for a little bit, I'll be like, okay, you gotten it out. Cool. Now we're going to go run it out. We're going to go, throw ladders or pull hose or go walk a building or do something like that. So I guess in answer to your question, what do you do when you have those people that have positive traits, but they may be going down a negative path? Is put them in a position where you can access the positive attributes that they have. Find out what they're good at, find out what's interesting to them, and then give them a platform to display those talents.
mhm.
Because firefighters like to be firefighters, and we like to give, and we like to be appreciated too. And so the when they accomplish a task, or complete some sort of training that's viewed as a positive for their brothers and sisters, that's when I think you can bring those people on board, is if you activate their talents. And you know um, when the complaining starts, just put a stop to it, let them get it out a little bit, but then say, hey, let's move on, let's focus on this and get things going in a positive direction.
Yeah, one thing I've been out of class now for a couple of years, and one thing that was interesting to me, and I gave it a shot, is I realized that from complaining myself and then trying to fix things myself, it takes so much more energy and time to fix things than it ever does to complain about them. And so at the end of those conversations, just going, okay, what's the solution? Like, seriously, let's work to put the solution into play and change that culture ourselves. And usually that's so exhausting and so laborious that they don't necessarily engage in that all the time. So it kind of
Yeah, and
cuts
sometimes
down complaining.
yeah, I mean, it keeps them busy, it keeps their energies channeled in a positive direction. And sometimes it's not that hard to fix. Sometimes it's we spend so much time figuring out why things don't work or won't work that we don't find a way to make them work. And sometimes making them work is just easier. It's just easier to just do it, get it off your plate, and get it done, and move forward. That's the thing. I think that sometimes we spend so much time um, trying to half-ass jobs and get out of work that it's easier just to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I like that. Um, Explain to me. So you were talking Lou Holtz and stuff like that. I know a little bit about your background, but I don't know how many people do here. When you were a kid, where did you learn leadership? Because you have a very unique exposure to leadership in this world. What was your background, and how did you start to first witness leadership?
Well, I, it was sort of an accident of birth, I guess. I was born into a family where my grandfather was a firefighter in Oregon, and then my dad didn't go down that path, and he went down the path of coaching. He was an All-American football player in college, and then um, played very briefly in the pros, and then got into coaching. And through witnessing the people that he worked with and his coaching style, that's kind of what influenced, unbeknownst to me, my fascination and my fascination with leadership, and then the way that I've tried to model myself as a company officer and things. So my dad worked his way up, coaching in high school first, and then took some unpaid graduate assistant jobs in college. Worked his way into major college football at UCLA, and then Virginia Tech, and then Oregon, Stanford, and places like that. And then where it really came into my line of sight was when I was in junior high, and my dad started coaching for the San Francisco 49ers, and I started going to training camp with him and working 2-day practices. And I did that from the time I was in the 6th grade all the way through high school. So saw some great things and didn't even understand what I was seeing. And so later on in life, as I was, as I made the decision to go into the fire service and started going down that leadership rabbit hole, that was when I started really picking my dad's brain and started putting words to the things that I always felt and kind of knew, but didn't understand why, those things existed in me. And so through a lot of the conversations I've had with him and a lot of self-reflection, I'm like, oh yeah, that's when that became apparent to me. And that's where I learned this. And I saw, like I said, I saw some things that I didn't even understand I was watching when I was growing up.
You said that he had I can't remember if I read it or saw it, I'm sorry, but a list 10 for 10 or 10 for you, 10 for me.
Yeah, 10 for you, 10 for me.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing some of that and kind of what that means?
That's 20 things. I don't have them memorized. I have them
no,
down.
But just general principle.
You're killing me. Hold on a second. Let me see. I think actually, yeah, I have it right here. Right next to me, as fate would have it.
You don't have to go through every one, but just kind of some of the highlights
just
of it.
What it is the reason why it's important to have mutually agreed upon expectations. Some people will say to you, I don't know that we need to memorialize the culture. I don't know that we need to write things down. I don't know that I actually beg to differ. I think that we need to write things down so we have something to reference. And it's not a way of, I think accountability sometimes gets a bad name. I think accountability is holding each other accountable so that things never really get out of hand. And if we're holding each other accountable, that's how this whole thing works. So the 10 for you, 10 for me is an accountability system where, I say, this is what I'm going to give to you as your company officer. And in exchange, this is what I expect from you as a firefighter or engineer. And, so from the company officer, the 10 things, and I'll go in order. Just real briefly, I won't delve into them unless you want me to, but it's number 1 is consistency. Number 2 is sense of urgency. Number 3 is never satisfied. Number 4 is leadership and direction. Number 5 is forthrightness. Number 6, open dialogue. 7, accountability. 8, technical command. 9, respect. And then 10 is sense of humor. So what we do is we sit down, and there's there's 10 more for the firefighter and the engineers or whoever you're supervising, no matter what you're doing. I mean, it works whether you're working in, high tech or in the fire service. But the 10 things for the firefighters and engineers are very similar to the ones that they are for the company officers. Some people even ask me, why aren't they the same? Like, they can be the same. But what it does is this is what I promised to give to you. And if I'm not giving you these things, then you have the right to come to me and we can talk about them.
So how do you have those tough conversations? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. How do you have those tough conversations? And I like what you're saying as far as accountability and open doors and open minds and stuff like that. But how do you have those conversations without everybody getting butthurt about the criticism, if you will, both good and bad criticism?
I think if you put it out there to begin with, and people understand that that's where we're coming from, and I expect it from you, just like I think you should expect it from me. People want to. I believe people want to improve, and people want to find ways to get better at their craft. And I think that's what it's all about. It's all about development and developing your people. Because if you're doing it right as a company officer, that's your legacy. Is how many quality, empathetic leaders you leave in your wake. So. In terms of having the tough conversations, you just can't be afraid of talking to people, and that's the main thing. Is communication is a huge thing. And if we say, hey, we talked about these things, and when we talk about the 10 for the company officer, I ask the people what it means to them. And what I hear is, things that are important to them within that 10 for you, 10 for me. So what it allows me to do is tailor my leadership style to the person, so that you create that investment, so that if people know that you genuinely care about them,
Hmm.
they're a whole lot more receptive to, you know, uh, coaching. And I consider it coaching as opposed to constructive criticism or anything like that. I mean, and a coach, the reason why I consider it coaching is if you're building the right relationship, a coach is the type of person who can correct behavior without creating resentment. And that's what we're shooting for. And I think that that's something that we lose the longer we go in life. When we're younger, um, you look up and there's these older people that seemingly know so much more than you, that coach you and mentor you and all that stuff. And I think as we get older, we sort of, if we're not careful, we lose that ability. And so I think that that's why I like the coaching analogy so much, is because I think if we're doing it right, and I think the pearl in this part of the conversation is the fact that if you're doing it right as a company officer, you're serving as a coach, and you're the person that can have those tough conversations that they're not easy for me either. I don't like to get up, crawl up someone's, backside about anything. But there are times when we have to, and then when we do, we talk about it like adults, and we come to a resolution, we correct whatever behavior it is, and we move on, and we don't harbor resentment. And the same thing goes for me. If my people come to me and say, "Hey, we talked about the 10 for you, 10 for me, and there's, I don't feel like you're giving me this in this area." If they're coming to me and I'm an honest self-evaluator, I need to sit there and understand that it took courage for them to come to me and talk to me about this, and then
Hmm.
B, be reflective enough to see what I bring to the situation, and then work to rectify it. And then once I've identified a hole in my game that I need to correct, I can't hold it against the person that came to me, because then that just completely erodes the trust. And we've all seen it where, you know, there'll be some sort of a grudge held because someone, said something to a person in a leadership position that damaged their ego or hurt their feelings, or whatever.
Yeah.
We have to put on our big boy pants.
Yeah, I think you did a good job there. Killing my follow-up question, because I was going to say, how do you as a firefighter or stay pliable to receive that criticism? But I think you did a good job there, kind of hitting that, because I think it's probably would you say it's a similar approach for a firefighter receiving the criticism as it is an officer, and being that
Absolutely. And I
introspection and
think
everything else?
it is. And I think the thing that the biggest problem that we have in the fire service is egos. And everybody gets their egos bruised when we're younger. It's all about ego, and it's all about, trying to look good for the older guys. And then as you move up in the organization, there's this fallacy that, and I went through it, where I felt like I had to know it all as a company officer, and I didn't feel um, like if I was looking for or requested help from somebody, that it was some sort of a sign of weakness. But I think that, we're foolish if we don't seek the counsel of our brothers and sisters, and we have to put our egos aside. And I think that's the main thing, is just have conversations from a standpoint of caring about one another and caring about people's growth and development, and that never stops. So um, but yeah, that's the main thing, is just, putting your ego away, and being able to be vulnerable. I think that's the word I was looking for. I was kind of fishing for it, but vulnerability is a huge thing. It's not it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of openness, and I think that that's a thing that is now sort of coming to the fore. I think over the last couple of years, empathy and vulnerability and things like that. If you read anything by Brene Brown or anything that she's written, she talks a lot about that and how important that is to opening doors, and making people feel comfortable around you, is showing that you're human. And that's why sense of humor, the list that I gave you for the 10 for you, 10 for me, and I can send it to you. Um, Sense of humor is in there, and maybe that needs to be number one, uh, as a company officer. And it's not about being a cut up and standing in front of the group and telling jokes and making fun of people. It's about, not taking yourself too seriously and not being afraid to fail. And I say it a lot. Because sometimes I think I'm tremendously clever. But there's I say that if you're taking yourself too seriously when you're in a leadership role, there's a good chance you're the only one who is. And there's nothing that firefighters like better, because we're collectively a bunch of smartasses. We like it when people are caught up in their own self-importance, right? And we have so much fun with that. And they'll just, it's relentless. If you can't laugh at yourself, people are going to be laughing at you, and it's not in a good way sometimes. So, be vulnerable and don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. It'll encourage other people to do it as well.
Excuse me. I want to follow up on something you were just saying, is the training and expectations. I think you hit on that just a little bit. How are you intentional about your training? So that's always a tough thing, right? We have a very big schedule, or a very busy schedule here. How are you intentional about your trainings? Can you talk about actually being planning out those trainings and what you're looking at as far as building your crew?
Well, I've been really lucky because I've had super motivated people that encourage me to get out of the station and do that. So one of the things that I think is it's really easy to say we're too busy to train, or we're too tired, or we've run too many calls, or whatever it is, and use things that happen throughout the day as an excuse to not train. And you can make anything training. And some of the best company officers that I ever met that didn't necessarily work for my department, I had the privilege of working with them through training groups and classes that I've gone to and things like that. You can make anything training. Go on an EMS call as you're walking away from the house after the medics or whoever transports the patient. Stand in front of the house, talk about it from a fire perspective. Because where do we go to fires? A lot of times we go to fires where we have EMS calls. So talk about it from a perspective of, hey, let's, what are the hazards here? How are we going to make this stretch? What are we going to do? Aaron Fields talks about, just going and grabbing a cup of coffee and walking the district. Doing things like that. Make it like a win-win. Hey, I got a cup of coffee and I got to walk around and see people and see buildings, see forcible entry problems, see water supply things in my area, that kind of stuff. One of my mentors, who was a battalion chief in San Jose, said, all I'm asking for my people sometimes, from even my busy companies, is 1 hour, one drill, once a day. And if you can get an hour of good solid training in, and you're on a busy company, that's pretty good. So it doesn't have to be overbearing. It doesn't have to be some big, huge thing, but it's got to be. It does have to have value. It can't just be some stupid thrown together drill that hasn't been thought about. You have to put some thought into it, but it's kind of fun. And when you're out there and you're sharing district knowledge, and you can employ other people in the crew who've got different skill set than you do, and put them in a position where they can lead the drill or talk about things. And then what you're doing is you're elevating people, making them feel valued, and putting them in a position where they can, people like it when new people step up and have the spotlight. So in that way, you're creating more people who are invested and showing leadership qualities.
I like that. And I think, if nothing else, we're kind of transitioning out of a culture of, sometimes our department is beautifully aggressive in training, and I really like that. But sometimes that gets to check the box trainings pretty heavy, because we do have a standard and expectation that this is. And so one thing I like about our current generation and the one coming forward is we're reverting back to that highly productive trainings. And so I like what you said there about the making sure that they are of value.
Well, absolutely. It's funny because my wife and I were driving in the car the other day, and I can't remember why it came up, but we were talking about, I think she came to see me do my presentation for the first time in 10 years. She's never seen it. And we were talking about it, and she was talking about how much energy I put into the conversation that we have. And I said, well, I don't want anybody walking away from anything that I do saying, wow, that was really average or that sucked. And, and that's why I try to put so much energy and thought into it, into the presentation. And we talked about, the fact that when I was, an acting company officer, we went to a training one time and we showed up, we had, 4 rigs there and 17 people and whatever it was. And we showed up and the training captain was like, I guess we'll find a spot to do this drill. And we walked around and we took probably 30 minutes to try to find a spot where we could, set up our rope rescue gear and rappel and do all that stuff. And afterwards I pulled him aside and I talked to him. I said, dude, you can't have 17 people show up for a training and not be prepared. I go, that was lame. And he actually said to me, he's a good guy. I mean, he just said, hey, and I don't know if he was having a bad day or what, but he said, hey, Mark, not every training has to be great. And I said, like, okay, well, I mean, I don't want to be a part of it if it's not awesome. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
if it doesn't have value and people aren't excited about training, then, I mean, there are some
Yeah.
rote things that we have to do that you have to do until you're sick of them. But, you know, you got to bring some enthusiasm and some thought to training, because if you don't, people are just going to phone it in and it's going to suck. And then they're not going to
Yeah.
want to come back.
I think that's key is and something you said earlier and then it's augmented there is it's not about motivating your crews, it's about not demotivating them. And
Mhm.
so that those check the box trainings, the ones that suck, you might as well just cancel because it's demotivating. Everybody's like, well,
Well,
walk through
I
the
mean, I
woods.
think we have enough. I think we have enough demotivating training, right? Where there's things that where we have to sit in front of a computer and do things like that, and those companies that we use shall remain nameless. But it's we're not good at. We like going 100 miles an hour with our hair on fire, making lots of noise and bombing down the street and doing stuff, and we like things that motivate us. So you know, keep training fresh, keep it short, have a point, and get it done.
Yeah, I like that. Um, you talk about culture is deliberate and how is it? Am I wrong in saying it's where training meets expectations?
Yeah, when training and
Talk to us.
expectations meet, that's when we have positive outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me about taking it from that. We've just talked about the training, and we've talked about the expectations. How do you pull that all together and kind of summarize it and start building that intentional culture?
Well, I think we have to show people the importance of what we do and create emotional bookmarks in people. And that was what really did it for me, was when I met the right group of people early on in my career, and I had some company officers that showed me the right way and pointed me in a direction where I went outside my organization. And I thought I was 26 or 27 when maybe 28, when I started venturing outside my department and seeing what was going on out there. And I started seeing some things and hearing a language spoken that we didn't speak in my department, and started um, and these guys that ended up being mentors of mine really pushed me in ways that I'd never been pushed before, and it challenged me, and it actually made me sort of reevaluate who I was as a firefighter. I'm like, wow, I'm not very good at this. I need to get better, and it kind of, I don't want to say scared me, but it did a little bit. And so that's a way to sort of you know um, it show people the value and show people why it's important that we do what we do. And that's why I really like what's going on right now in the country as far as the firefighter rescue survey, and the talk that's going on with that is, telling people that, hey, 10 people on average a day are pulled out of fires and rescued and survive, and here's why it's important, here's why we do, here's why we have to get, fast effective searches and fast effective water on the fire and things like that. That's why it matters, is because we want to be that company that shows up and makes a difference, because it does make a difference. We used to tell people that something like, I don't know, 100 people die a day in fires. I don't know what the statistics are. I mean, I need to do more studying before I talk about it, with any kind of authority. But we used to focus on the negative. It's like, no, let's focus on the positive. Let's, here's where we're making a difference, and let's do that. And time matters and that kind of thing. So for me, it was about, getting that emotional investment and having people show me the importance of what we do. Um, and that's what really got me motivated. So I think if you can impress upon people, um, the value of what we really do and show people case studies, because, a lot of people don't open books and they don't read trade magazines, or they don't, read firefighterclosecalls.com or things like that. And that's where, we can bring things to their attention. And it could be, if you want to have a sit down meeting at the coffee table in the morning, just say, hey, this happened, this mayday occurred, or this line of duty death occurred. What can we learn from it? And here's the NIOSH report and things like that. So we keep it
Like
interesting.
that. You had a term that I don't know if you even know you used or not, but emotional bookmarks. Can you expand on what that term was? I haven't heard that before, and I really like it.
I think that came from the book Deep Survival that I read a number of years ago by Lawrence Gonzalez, and the subtitle is Who Lives, Who Dies, and Why. But in training, I think it came from that. I'm not sure, but um, in training or in survival situations, we respond to things that we have an emotional response to. And just as an example, when I was active with the RIT cadre in California, of which I learned so much from all those people, and they were an amazing group of people that luckily I was brought in under their wing. But what they did was when they when they talked about the importance of firefighter survival skills and rapid intervention training and things like that, they brought um, case studies into it, where we actually studied tragedies across the American Fire Service, and even in Canada and things like that, where things happened, and some of these guys actually knew the people that were involved in them, and they talked about it, and it put me in a place where I had that emotional investment where I'm like, oh wow, that could happen to me, or that could happen to my brothers and sisters, and I got to be better at this because I care about them, I love them, and so um, when we can create that emotional investment in people, that I think helps kind of kickstart motivation, is when they're bought into it that way.
Hmm. And so that group actually, you were interested in talking about the RIT training that you did there. That group was actually doing case studies and then training applications based off of the case studies.
Yeah, so I mean, we would a lot of it came from the initial stuff that the training was based upon, was the recovery training that went on in Phoenix after the Brett Tarver incident.
Okay.
And so, the 16 firefighters to rescue one, all that stuff. And so, we actually, watch the news video of the live footage of when, you know, Tarver was calling for help, and it was excruciating.
Mhm.
It was extremely emotional, and I'd never seen or experienced anything like that before. It was awful. But what it did was it motivated me to say, oh wow, it can happen here, it can happen anywhere, and it motivated me to get better and work harder at getting better.
Very interesting. Um, you spend a lot of time focusing on the positive, and I like that. What value has that shown throughout as you're developing trainings or leadership style? You spend a lot of time focusing on the positive. What value has that brought to your style?
Well, I nobody really likes to sit around and listen to anybody complain about stuff. I think what it does is it just sort of detracts from your credibility. If you're standing in front of a group and you're bad mouthing your organization, or you're bad mouthing this or that, or you know, um, people want. I mean, you have to be realistic too. I mean, you have to understand that not everything's great, and not everything's going to work out perfectly. Um, but one of the things that um, I just think it just helps, because when you, like I said, you sit around and complain, you're not going to get anywhere, and then people like to feel sorry for themselves and complain, and people also like to be firefighters. So I'd rather do things that motivate people and get them excited to do what we want to do, rather than have to undo all that complaining and negativity before we even start. And that's why I said, when we would have morning meetings at the firehouse, sometimes if guys would sit around, it used to drive me crazy when I was a firefighter, because we would sit and have these 2-hour morning meetings sometimes and just get nothing done. We'd do our rig checkouts and do some light housework, and then we'd sit down for a morning meeting and talk about department business for 2 hours, and then it was time to go shop. and then you'd eat lunch, and then you'd take a nap, and then you'd work out, and the day'd be over. And so I, I wanted to learn as much as I could from, the older guys and the captains that I worked with, and some of them were great. So don't get me wrong, but that's why I'm a big I was a big proponent of, all right, boom, boom, boom. Here's what we're doing. What do you need to do? Here's what the department needs us to do. Let's hit the ground running, and get out of the station and get moving pretty early. Yeah, but I'm not relentlessly positive. I have my moments too. I mean, it is hard
Sure.
to be a cheerleader all the time. What you have to do is when you have those moments where you have to get it out, and you've got something in you that you have to get out, these toxic feelings or whatever. You have to have a select group of people that you can talk to in confidence, and get those things out, because as a person in a leadership role, if you're actively complaining about the organization in front of the young people, it erodes your credibility.
Hmm. One thing I like that you were saying is that you ask everybody in the morning what they need to get done. I don't feel like that's always done by every officer. I've had some that do that and some that don't. But that's really very interesting, because that's
Well, I
that
think one of
buy-in
the
on both
things
sides.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that you can sort of tell, is telling about, somebody when they become a company officer or move up in the organization to leadership roles is, you know, if you really are a fly on the wall and listen to what they talk about, you'll hear some people say, "I took the captain's test because I wanted to control my day. I took the captain's test because I wanted my own room. I wanted my this, I, me, my, and all those things." And I think respect comes from, people say you got to give it to get it. And as a company officer, one of the most important things you can do is show respect for your people's time, and understand that it's not about you. And that's why I say, in the morning, ask people what they want to do. You know what they're up to. If your driver is studying for a captain's test or lieutenant's exam, find out what they're working on, and help them with it, and rearrange the day in such a way that you can get those things done. Let them work on the things that they want to work on, understanding that we still have to meet the organizational goals, right? Get those things done. If I've got inspections I got to do or whatever it is, or we've got public demos, or we need to do those things, and then calls notwithstanding, I'm going to try to give you the time to work on what you need to work on. And workout time should be sacred, meal time should be sacred, things like that. Again, those are subject to interruption by emergency calls, but just because I don't feel like working out doesn't mean I don't make time for the crew to work out. Have to. And we eat when the crew's hungry, not when I'm hungry, because
Yeah,
I'm hungry all the time. So if it
I
were up
like
to me,
that.
we'd be eating all day.
I can agree with that. Depends who the chef is. We've got a great one. So
I just eat.
whatever's there.
Mhm.
Um, Forgive me, I just blacked out. I had a question for you and I can't remember what it was.
It's okay. I do it all the time.
Yeah, so I don't have it. I'm going to try to divert now.
Okay.
What are some of the things that, as you've gone through your career, like you said, you're not always motivated, but you try to you ebb and flow. Maybe you're at the peak of your motivation, or what are some of the things that you've learned as you go through your career? I've got just 12, 13 years on, something like that, starting to kind of look at that company officer leadership role. What would you tell yourself at this point in your career?
Strike a balance. It kind of it There's a way to have a healthy level of engagement and still be, a kick-ass firefighter, and not have it rule your entire life. That was what I went through, and a lot of self-aggrandizing and things, putting my family second, um, sometimes third. Sometimes it was Mark, the fire department, and then everything else. And so making sure that we're giving our family and ourselves, you know, uh, their just due, because I don't know if you got it on the video or anything, but kind of like we were talking about at the very beginning, how important it is to recognize the sacrifice that our families make for us and how much they support us in our dream, that is the fire service. You know, but strike a balance and figure out what that balance point is, because if you don't have balance in your life, if you're redlining it too much, there's a lot of bad roads you can go down, health
Yeah.
wise, or so strike a balance.
From a personal point of view, I can definitely promise you that that's true.
Oh, me too.
Healthy relationship, no, just stand on the throttle, and then next thing you know, you're like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, there they went. Oh, bummer.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all know
so
people that. What's the divorce rate amongst public safety people? 75%.
atrocious. Yeah,
Yeah. Normal humans, it's 50%, which isn't good either. So you're up against it anyway. And then when you add all the stresses that we subject ourselves to, and the sleep deprivation and all that, you got to be really careful. So there's only so much room, you know. So, and you can only
yeah,
give 100% in basically one area. You can't. Everybody thinks that you can give 100% in a bunch of different areas, but you can only really be great at one thing. So
yeah. It's
choose
interesting.
wisely.
It's about your philosophy today, not mine. But I had to come to terms with it a few years ago, and still have a healthy family and everything. I'm blessed there. Um, but I prioritized everything by the length of the relationship. So God is eternal. My wife is for life. My kids are until I can raise them to marriage or a healthy adulthood. And the fire service is for 25 to 30 years. And so I try to keep everything. And if I keep everything in that order, which I'm not always good at, then, I hope that in the end it stays healthy and with that balance that you're talking about.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting that you put it that way, where the fire service is 25 to 30 years. But in that 25 to 30 years, we hit that hard, man. We
Yeah.
beat that up, and that's where we put almost everything,
Yeah.
and I think that the thing is, it's important to work it hard when you're there, and win your individual battle, like I said earlier, every single day when you show up, and control how you show up, and do the best that you can possibly do, but make sure that it fulfills you, and make sure that you're doing something that fulfills you. And if it doesn't fulfill you anymore, then and you're angry about it, then you need to reevaluate your priorities, and maybe take a step back and look at maybe doing something else. So
how have you seen people do that in a healthy way? Or have they, because it's one of those where maybe you don't need to leave the fire service. I think we forget this a lot too. We don't need to leave the fire service. Maybe we just need to take a step back from a special team or a certain segment of the optional responsibilities until you can kind of get your mind right and then step back up and engage. Have you seen
no,
anybody do
absolutely.
that? Is it a real thing?
Oh, I had to. So I did it myself. And so, but the thing that's hard about that is, given the personalities that we have, in terms of being all in all the time and all that stuff, when you even dial it back, which, if you're extremely engaged in the fire service or whatever job you're into, if you're just buried in it, and it's your lifestyle, and you love it, and you're super into it, and then when you dial it back a little bit, you're still probably better than 90% of the people out there, let's say. But what does it feel like to you? Like, if you dialed it back, what does it feel like to you when you say, "Oh, I'm gonna get off this specialty program, or I'm gonna do this, or
It's
I'm not
hard.
gonna be." Yeah, it
It's
feels
almost
like
like
you're
you're
giving
quitting.
up.
Yeah.
hmm And I described it, basically, you'll feel like a quitter, and then it'll hurt worse than any breakup you've ever been through. Um, and I've never been through a divorce, so I don't know. Um, but you know, I described it almost like the 5 or 6 stages of grief. I can't remember what it was. I don't know. I don't have all of them, but basically, you'll start to come out of it after a while, and you'll find that there is life on the other side, and there is a healthy balance to be struck. But in my case, I was going too hard at about probably year uh, 14 or 15 or something, and basically was redlining all the time, and and then not sleeping and working too much and not getting along with my family, and ended up in the hospital because of a cardiac condition, and it's since resolved itself. It was short lived. It was like a month where I was kind of weird, and I was off work, but I made some lifestyle adjustments where I was like, okay, I can't I can't go as hard in the paint at work as I always did, and the world doesn't need me to fix it. And once I let go of some of that stuff, then things got better, and my health got better, and my relationship with my wife and my kids got better, and things like that. So I think that that's the thing, and I think that the longer you go in your career, you become much more pragmatic, and I think that that's important too. Is understanding that you know sometimes you know being open to other ways of doing things, and allowing other people to take the lead sometimes is okay.
Hmm. Um, you just said a quote there that's very interesting. The world doesn't always need you to fix it.
Correct.
So
And
I feel like
that's our
that for
first.
firefighters. Go ahead.
What's that? No, you go
I
ahead.
just feel
You
like that for
first.
firefighters is very difficult to understand, because when we show up, we fix crap and we leave. And so it's very difficult to sit at a kitchen table and not fix the arbitrary problem or whatever it is. So,
Well, I liken it to like a flock of birds, right? Right, you know how they fly in that V formation, and that one bird's in the front, taking all the wind, and being that wedge that just the wedge breaker that makes it easier for everybody else in the formation to fly. Then that bird gets tired and it drops to the back of the formation, right? And then there's someone else who's in the lead, and they got to do the job. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is understanding that there's a lot of capable people out there that are good people, that are good at their job, that just because you're not doing it doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It may look different than how you were going to do it, but ultimately it's about getting to the right place, and being healthy, and living a long life after our career. So um, I was in a think tank one time with a bunch of people that were way smarter than me, and I didn't belong in the room. Alan Bernstein, he was one of the guys in the room one time, and we were talking about those moments in our lives, in our careers, where things changed for us. And one guy said, after going through a lot of personal stuff, he said, I figured out that the world didn't need me to fix it. And I was like, it was kind of an epiphany for me. And I think I can't remember if I had my health thing before or after that, but it yeah, it was an eye opener for me. You don't have to hold on so tight, and you can allow other people to drive. And the thing is, if we're doing things right anyway, I mean, we're preparing other people to take our place, and when we walk out the door, the place shouldn't miss a beat. If we're doing things right, and I've said it before, if you're mentoring and doing things right, people may miss you when you leave, but they won't need you. If they need you, you haven't been mentoring, you've been coddling. And so
hmm.
that's what it's all about, is preparing other people to step up and do your job when you leave. And there's a fair amount of letting go that happens in order for that process to take place. And that's what maybe I didn't understand when I was newer, when the older guys would kind of hang back and let the young kids kind of you know fumble around, and bear cub stuff around and do whatever and figure it out. That was letting us grow and develop.
Hmm. Uh, I would love to keep on that topic just a little bit as you talk about um, basically your legacy. You've said a couple of different things about legacy, from a couple pages back, of it being your legacy is the empathetic and motivated leaders that you leave behind you. And then,
Hmm.
here you're talking about actually, as you get towards the end of your career, your goal ought to basically be making you unemployed and unnecessary comparative to the next generation. I mean, can you expand on your legacy? Because you've obviously experienced that in the last year with retirement. What has that meant to you, and how did you approach it?
Um, it- it's kind of funny because a lot of people ask me, how do you feel about being retired? And there's things obviously that I do miss about the job, but I don't have some deep sense of regret, or that um, like I think when you have that regret is when you feel like you left some things on the table, or you left some things undone or unsaid. And I think that you know a lot of people in my position, and I'm speaking from my contemporaries in my department that I worked with, we worked the job hard. And I think that a lot of us feel like we left it better than we found it. And we're not stopping. I'm trying to continue that, in retirement and spread ideas and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, I just I feel like one of the things that I reflect on, and this is more of um, speaks more to who these people are than my experience with them is, a lot of the guys that I worked with are now, that were when they were younger, they've promoted to company officer, the guys that wanted to, and they're good ones. And one of the things that I think one of the best compliments somebody paid to me recently was one of my retired guys who's now a captain. He said, I always felt safe working with you, and I always felt like I was going to go home at the end of my shift. And I think that that's one of the most important things that people can, feel is that sense of security, that there is that layer above them that knows what's going on and has a plan. And I think that that's some of the frustration sometimes that people feel with leadership is when there is no plan and nobody knows where we're going, and just people basically, jump on the basketball court and shoot. And my dad used to say they shoot and holler shit. It's like, which means you don't have a plan. And so, um, I don't know. I think that's like I said, the testament to who you are is the number, or who you were as a leader is the number of uh, functionally intelligent, empathetic leaders you leave in your wake. And I think that when I look at the contemporaries, the people that I worked with and I came in with, and we left kind of together over the course of about a year or 6 months, I think that happened, and it was a collective effort. It wasn't just me. I just seemed to be the loudest about it.
I like that. Um, work the job hard. I like that term.
Well, I think that's the goal, right? I mean, I think that we did work it hard, and I think that we were extremely involved and tried to leave. Maybe we didn't articulate it this way the entire time, but we were very interested in leaving it better than we found it. And I think that we did. And you can look at it in in the projects that people started because they were inspired by some of the things that we turned them on to, and then they took those. It's like a coaching tree, right? I mean, you look at if you look at the NFL, you look at the people that worked for the Washington football team 10 or 15 years ago. Was I think five of them are head coaches in the NFL right now. McVay, Shanahan, the guy who's with what's his name at uh, the guy for the Colts, and then the guy at Green Bay. I mean, it's preparing people to take the next step, and I think that a lot of us did that, and I don't think you fully realize, you know, what that impact is until you've been out for a while, or you pause and reflect on it. And you know and you got to give credit to those people for being their own people, but you can take some pride in having some you know some part in their growth and development.
So, interesting thing is, you talk a lot about leadership, but what about the informal leaders? Let's say that those members don't seek promotion because that's not in their DNA. How do you kind of gauge and value informal leaders in the firehouse? And
I think you have
person.
to have again, it all goes back to conversations and creating trust. And I think that um, you have to let them know what their value is, and tell them what their value is to you, and be truthful in the value that they bring to the organization, and realize that they can have conversations sometimes that you can't have as a company officer. There were guys that I employed as senior guys that, if someone was getting off leash at the dinner table and I was about to blow my top, I would just kind of shoot them a look, and they would nod, and they would say, "Hey," and they would, take the person in question outside and have a talk with them, tune them up,
Yeah.
and not only that, not only can they help set the tone in terms of culture and holding people accountable in that way, they also have tremendous, a lot of times they're the ones that just sit back and they're really quiet. They just sit back and watch. And when they do speak up, when the quiet ones start speaking up, that's when you really need to listen. And when the people who don't say anything, just sit back and observe, really have something to say, then it's time to pause and listen. Um, and find out what they're excited about and then employ them, bring them into the fold. And like I said earlier, the more people we activate in teaching and leadership and coaching roles, the better off we're going to be. Because people feel like they're contributing and they feel good about coming to work, and they feel like they're valued as a person and they're contributing to the overall effort. So finding out what people are good at, because everybody's good at something, and everybody has value that they can add to the organization, and everybody has something that they're excited about. And I know what I'm excited about. I know what I'm not excited about, and I'm not a good person to teach the things I'm not excited about. So find those senior people and find out what they're excited about, and use them for the positive.
Um,
I should say activate them, don't use them.
Activate. I'm actually going to write that down because that's seems to be a key difference that could be seen on the outside. As you've obviously you've made an impact. Utilize, yeah, activate and utilize. As you've been 13, 14 years now that you've just been contributing to this side of the message. And I'm a man of faith. I don't know where you're at on that, so forgive me. But even the Bible says you'll never be a prophet in your own land. And I hear and talk about with a lot of people that struggle employing some of this stuff where you may make a national impact, but you don't necessarily get to see it. You can change your crew and you can change the world, but for some reason the department doesn't always like you. Have you seen that? Have you had an approach that's been successful to that, or successes been failures in that?
I think, I think that's totally true. I always find it, that's one of the things that I talk about when I go places and do, the leadership classes. There's people sitting in this room that can deliver this message to you that work for this department, but you're too close to it. That's the thing, is I think that, it's easy for someone to come in and spread ideas, and then you leave and you don't see them every day. You don't see them in moments of frustration. You don't see them in moments where, maybe they're not looking their best, And so I think that that's one of the things that um, uh, is difficult when you're trying to be that prophet in your own land, And I think that it leads to a lot of frustration too, and you have to be able to work through that. And what I had to do, because part of it, led to some of my health struggles, was I basically just scaled back, you know, the scope of what I was trying to do in my department, and it made my life easier, and it made it kind of made some of the higher ups, I think, breathe a sigh of relief, because I was just like, "Hey, I'm just going to focus on, um, you know, running the most effective fire company I possibly can, and then train within the battalion and do things like that." But I wasn't trying to do sweeping organizational changes and things like that. And there would be people from staff that would come to me and ask questions and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or, and it was cool. It was nice to have people try to activate me in that way. But I think sometimes you have to, in order to keep yourself sane, you may have to go outside your department and find that validation, that you know you may not get in your department, because again, people are too close to it. Um, and you may have to join a training group, a fools group, or attend classes to have people tell you, "Hey, man, I'm getting the same thing in my department." And sometimes, I kind of said that I was sort of you know affecting change from the outside in, saying, "All right, well, if we can't necessarily," and the thing is, as a group, we affected a lot of change in our department, right? Did some really good things. Um, but I think change sometimes is subjective to, or it's subject to your wants and desires, and you want it to look the way that you want it to look. And it doesn't always look that way. And sometimes people have to point it out to you. But I guess my point is, uh, yes, did I experience some of those frustrations? Yes. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that, the thing is, if you don't have any ideas, you can't be a nuisance, right? So, when people have new ideas and they want to do things differently, then they're seen as creating more work for other people, you know, and so I think that that's sometimes why people are viewed that way.
You talk quite a bit about a small select group that um, your cohort, if you will.
Mhm.
I think I see the value in that, especially in our own department and in other people that I talk to. How did you find that cohort? How did you nurture it, maintain it, and build those, kind of expand on those talents over the years? Was it intentional, accidental?
Uh, I think both. I mean, it's one of those things where you just kind of you start gravitating towards like-minded people, people that share sort of your same values and motivations, which I think is important. Like I said, getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats. Um, you just you kind of know the people who are gonna be the players and are sort of in it for the right reasons, where their work ethics there, their value system is there. They're doing the training and they're doing things for the right reason. They're preparing to do the job, they're not preparing to promote. And as you prepare to do the job, maybe your promotions will come maybe a little bit later. But um, you know, uh, some of the guys that I ran with, we started fire science school together when we were in our early 20s, and then we ended up working together at various times, and some of us ended up in the same department. A lot of us did ended up in the same department. It was great, and those guys, we're all kind of transitioning out now. But when you look at the body of work that you know we collectively were able to um, put together, it's actually you know pretty impressive. And
That's cool.
that was a small part, but yeah,
I
I think you
really
need to surround yourself with people who are chasing excellence, and I think that there's things that you have to do in order to get there, and it's not easy, and you got to put in the work. And that's, again, you got to put in the work to be excellent, and then you also have to strike a balance. So
I just want to reiterate a statement that you said that I don't want anybody here to miss, because it just screamed inside of my ears when I heard it, was continuously prepared to do the job, don't prepare to promote. And then the promotion will come when it does. So I really like that statement a lot.
well, I posted something yesterday that kind of probably pissed some people off, because that's what I do, like on social media, is I'll just kind of lob something out there. And I think that the meme that I posted yesterday was, simply passing a promotional test doesn't qualify you to do anything. Um, and I think that's true. I mean, you have to clear the organizational hurdles, right? That the organization sets forth in order for you to move into a leadership position or whatever position it is. But it's the quality of the work that you put in ahead of the promotional test that determines how you're going to be, and how you try to live your life and your career, right? Starting at day one, from the moment you walk through the door, it's about setting the right example, and controlling how you show up, and being the person that you said you'd always be, winning your individual battles, so that when you do get promoted, it just makes sense. And so, I'm the people that maybe may or may not have gotten upset about the fact that I posted that. If you're upset about it, cool. Maybe you're looking in the mirror. But if you just shrug your shoulders and go, they're not talking to me, you're either delusional or you're right. So but it's about preparing to take the job. It's not about just taking a test and holding down a spot. It's about you know owning the magnitude of your responsibility when you promote into a position, and knowing how important that job is, whatever it is.
Own the magnitude of the responsibility. It's interesting. I think that could apply to everybody. And I have some new members where, I'm trying to impress on them. They're 18 to 21 years old, and it's, they're still coming out of it with that high school mindset of, and I even heard it yesterday, was, well, I'm just glad I have somebody else to tell me which hose line to pull. And it's like, no, that's, you're in the big leagues now, so it's really important that you start mastering that trade. So owning the magnitude of your responsibility.
Well, it is, but it also is nice to have, when you're that young and you don't have the experience. It is nice to have someone to be able to say, hey, pull that one, right?
Mhm.
Grab that tool, do this. And that's our role too, is if those people need that, then they need it. And then afterwards, hey, let's talk about why we did it. And going forward, here's what we're going to do. Make it a learning opportunity. Because, at I don't think I started growing up till I was like 46. You know, so I mean, I just think that luckily I had some good people around me, but especially when I was younger. But yeah, I mean, that's an exciting time, being 18 or 19
Yeah.
years old and being in the fire service and stuff. I mean, it's awesome. So
Yeah.
I got
I
hired
keep
in
trying to
I got
say
hired
give
in
grace. I keep trying to
what?
say give grace because if I would have been hired in the fire service at 20 years old, I'd have been fired 100 times before I was 28 when I got hired full time. So,
Oh,
uh,
I don't I if I had to supervise the firefighter that I was when I was 26 or 27, I'd slap the taste out of my own mouth. And I mean it. And that's the thing that's hard is you have to understand that sometimes these people that are the pushers and the people that you know the pushers and the ones that are super motivated, they're troublemakers sometimes too. And if you can activate those people for the positive, you can take that energy and channel it in the right direction. That's super huge.
yeah,
And don't write people off just because they make one mistake. Give them you got to give them second chances, third chances sometimes, but you got to, we do have to hold each other accountable, right?
yeah, yeah. One thing that, and I really kind of have focused on with my crews here is I want you to create non-fatal errors. I think that's important is, um, creating a non-fatal error on the training ground is a benefit because then you've learned we do run rep maxes in the uh, training room or in the workout room, but we don't do one rep maxes all the time on the training ground. So if you hook up a hose line to the wrong intake discharge, if I can't get a bumper line charged and you have to learn how to break it and adapt and overcome that one, that non-fatal error on the training ground is emotionally imprinted to you for the rest of your life and you're never going to forget it. So
Right. And we used to say it like when I was playing sports, make your mistakes full speed, in training and in practice, don't do them half-assed. If you're going to make a mistake, make it full speed. Right. And that's kind of what you were alluding to, I think, if I heard you right.
yeah, make mistakes full speed. I like that. I might have to borrow that. So you've been very gracious with your time, so I don't want to eat up too much of your time, but I noticed behind you, and obviously through everything you speak about and the depth of your knowledge in these subjects, you're obviously an adamant reader and a learner, a lifelong learner. Guide me through that process, if you will, real briefly, the importance of it, and then afterwards, I want to ask you kind of about your bibliography. And I always like to learn how people learn, and then where to go to get that. Is that
Okay. Um, what? What was the question? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the specifically the value of being a lifelong learner because you're obviously
Oh,
very
yeah.
well read.
Well, John Wooden said uh, and John Wooden was the legendary basketball coach from UCLA from the 1960s and 70s, and he said, once you're through learning, you're through, right? And that, and when I was talking to my dad about, you know, um, when he knew it was time for him to hang up his whistle when he was coaching and stuff was, he said he didn't enjoy the process anymore. And when he stopped looking forward to doing what he did, he knew it was time to hang it up. And that's why, you know, when maintaining the beginner's mind and keeping an open mind to things and constantly being open to new ideas and stuff, that's what helps keep it fresh for you and be able to look at things from a different perspective. And once you start losing that, maybe it is time to start moving on. And towards the end of my career, I started being less enthusiastic about the things I used to be really enthusiastic about, and maybe even started to resent some of the things that we did. And so I knew it was time. I didn't love it as much as I used to, and I'd sort of lost some of my passion for the job. And so I said, oh, it's time for me to turn it over to somebody else. I made it. I crossed the finish line. So, um, but I think that's the key to keeping things fresh and new is being open to new ideas. And that's why it's so important to go outside and see what's going on outside your department. Is there's different ways of speaking and different ways of doing things, and people that can re-engage some of your passion. So that's what was pretty instrumental to keeping me young in the fire service for a really long time. Um, and then the second part of the question was.
So I want a quick follow up on that. When you say go outside, and I see this quite often, and I've done it, you go outside. Two different things. One is earlier. I think it's Kyle Romiga says that early in your career you go outside and your mind gets blown, and then later in your career you're going out and you're just mining for gold. It's the little nuggets that you're going to bring back, and it's going to change things. But when you said go outside, how do you go outside and not immediately come back and want to change the world? Because I see people come back with a PowerPoint and they're like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. We got to employ all these things." What did you strike a balance there? And if
Not
so, how?
initially.
Okay.
Not initially. I mean, that was the thing, I mean, I think like a lot of us, there's a lot of classes like Kyle said, you go out and you take a class, your mind is blown and you come back and you want to, everything that one of my favorite things that, and this is a gross generalization, but guys will go out and take a class and they'll come back to their department and they go, everything that we do here sucks and everybody's going to die. Right. Right. Because
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
because they took this class, it's the greatest thing ever, whether it's moving hose or doing searches or forcing doors or whatever it is. Um, you know, so how do you get through that? First of all, the fire service is ripe with fads. We're type A personalities that glob onto the newest and greatest thing. I mean, I can think of just off the top of my head how many fad diets, fad, you know, blenders and pickleball is the new one, right? That everybody across the world is playing pickleball in the fire service, and right. So it's the greatest thing ever until it's not. And so what you got to do is you got to tell people, if you've been through it yourself, just say, pace yourself. Cool, that's great. You're excited about it. Talk to me about it. Let's figure it out, because I ran into these roadblocks myself, and let's figure out a way that you can, further your cause and make us better as an organization. We'll help you. You'll get the credit when you're all done. But make sure that we tell people to kind of pump the brakes, and because you can't come at people and accuse them of sucking at their job because they don't like smooth bores or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just, you're an idiot because you like task force tips. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that whole thing is funny too, because we went through that whole thing too, and it's great. The way that we deploy hose better than we ever have, and it's a lot easier. But I mean, I never went to a fire once that didn't go out with a combination nozzle. But I get it. I get that change going back to the beginning is important. But just telling people to pace themselves, because you're gonna get a whole lot further when you say, hey, let me show you something that'll help you make your life easier or your job easier, rather than saying you suck because you know
Yeah. So if the second part of that question, if you will, is we just talked about the value of being, and I liked your term, maintaining a beginner's mindset. Um, where did you go for information? Your kind of bibliography. What should I be reading? What should my cohort be reading at this point in my career as we begin to walk into a leadership position? Where do you go for that?
let's see. There's a lot of stuff that I like. Let me see here. What do I have right here? There's anything on servant leadership I like. What else do I have here? Any book by John Wooden, which I don't have anything in front of me right now. Gosh, a lot of this stuff is like about how to write. It's interesting. Um, but Gosh, I don't know. Highest Duty, a book by Chesley Sullenberger, who the Miracle on the Hudson, the
Mhm.
U.S. Airways flight from a bunch of years ago. They just had I think the 20th anniversary of it, or the 10th anniversary of it.
Holy cow, it's been that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Small Unit Leadership is another book that I like. That's by Dandridge Malone. That was one of the first books I read on leadership. And then what else? It's Your Ship by I think it's David Abershoff. Another good book. There's a bunch of stuff out there. I mean, people ask me, are you? I was talking to somebody on a flight when I was going somewhere, and I told them what I did in terms of leadership, and that sort of thing. And they said, "Oh, are you a fan of John Maxwell? And who are you a disciple of?" And I said, "I'm a disciple of Fred VonAppen." And they said,
Hmm.
"Who's that?" I said, "My dad. Don't worry about it."
That's
So
cool.
there's a lot of great stuff out there, but I can usually tell within the first 5 or 6 pages, or maybe the first chapter, whether or not I'm going to be into it. And there's a lot of leadership books I start and like, nope, nope.
Yep. I feel that.
Because I have a very distinct, style that I try to employ and a belief system. And if the first thing that somebody talks about is, how everything that they do works and nothing else does, then I'm like, nope, because there was this is actually maybe going to be the forward to the book I'm trying to write, but I can't seem to, stay focused on it. Number of years ago, not a number of years ago, last year, I was at the Phoenix Firefighter Symposium, and I was really excited to be there because, Phoenix is kind of a place that I've sort of put up on a pedestal in terms of, how they do everything, and they seemingly do everything right. And they were looking for sort of a cultural reboot for themselves because they felt like they had sort of slid, and they were industry leaders for a while, and they wanted to get back on track. And so I was excited because I was, brought in as a speaker there, and I was very honored to be there. And I had to speak after 2 Navy SEALs came up, and I'm like, oh, no pressure there. Just here I'm, some dumb fire captain from nowhere, California, and I'm coming up talking after two heroes, really. And the first thing one of them said was, every time I speak at a lot of these conferences, and every time I come and listen to people talk about leadership, I never learn anything new. And I kind of was like, oh, snap, like, uh-oh, right? And so I'm like, where's he going with this? Well, what he meant was, every time he comes, it just reaffirms his belief system that his true north is pointing him in the right direction. And he hears things that reinforce his belief system, and he knows he's on the right path. And I think that
Hmm.
that's the thing, right? I think that that's, however you know, lead, and whatever your leadership style is, it all goes back to the very beginning of this conversation that we how we started it. If you're not putting your people first, you're doing it wrong. And if you put your people first, you're going to create that trust, and it's going to grow from there. So, because you're not going to go anywhere without people trusting you. So, if we could wrap it all up and go back to the beginning, that's you know there's no ideas on leadership, but the one constant is it's all about the people. And so put your people first, and you'll be doing it right.
Very cool. Well, Mark, like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you so much. If you'll stay with me on here just while we end the stream, but can you tell all of my members how can they learn more about you, where can they find you, and how can they follow up on your content?
Uh, well, if you want to put my email up there, it's markvonappen@yahoo.com. You can share my phone number with, well, no. But you can go to on Instagram, it's @fullyinvolvedofficial. And then on Facebook, it's the Fully Involved blog is what it's called. So,
Very
and
cool.
then from time to time, I'll share content from fire engineering if I get something published or something like that. So,
Well, sir, I appreciate it very, very much. And hopefully we can have you in and have a more formal sit down with this kind of stuff and buy an actual
for
cup of
sure,
coffee then.
for sure. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm glad we finally got this together, and thanks for having a conversation with me. It was fun.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.